And our focus tonight is going to be Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit to the United States of America. And these are the first visuals that we are bringing for our viewers. Prime Minister Narendra Modi has arrived in Philadelphia. His plane has landed, and there you can see the Indian diaspora, members of the Indian diaspora waiting to welcome Prime Minister Narendra Modi in the United States of America. Remember, he is on a 3-day visit to the US, and there are a lot of engagements lined up over the next 3 days. And there you can see first visuals of Philadelphia that we are getting for you. Prime Minister Narendra Modi has arrived in the US, and there you have the Indian diaspora, the members of the Indian community waiting to welcome Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Now, this is going to be his 8th visit as the Indian Prime Minister to the United States of America, and because it comes just few days ahead of the big US election, it becomes even more important. And as we continue to bring you the latest updates from there, let's quickly tell you about the engagements that are lined up for Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Here's what his itinerary is looking like over the next 3 days. Firstly, that's 21st of September. It's going to be the Quad Summit. That's going to be very, very important. Remember, Quad, a group of 4 nations, including India, US, and Australia and Japan, and the leaders of all 4 countries are going to meet. The summit will focus on regional security and the Indo-Pacific strategy specifically. So this is the most important thing as far as this 3-day visit to the US is concerned that we'll be keeping an eye on. Then on September 22nd, the diaspora and CEO engagements are very important. Prime Minister Narendra Modi will be addressing the Indian American community there, and then he's going to have a business roundtable with the big CEOs. He's going to have a business meeting. The event is very, very important. It's going to be an opportunity to strengthen the economic ties and attract investment. That's going to be focus number 2 on 22nd of September, engagement with global leaders in bilateral discussions. So apart from this Quad meeting, he's also going to have one-on-one bilateral meetings with the leaders of the nations from the Quad. Now, on 23rd of September, there is going to be a summit that PM is going to participate in. That is the UNGA summit, Summit for the Future. Now, this becomes very, very important as well. And then Prime Minister Modi to address UN in New York. That's the engagement for 23rd of September. And it begins soon after he has landed in the United States of America. The first thing to look forward is going to be the Quad Summit. And as far as the UN Summit is concerned, that's going to address pressing future global challenges. And that is going to be important as well on 23rd of September. Let's now go across to Malvika, who is joining us live from the United States of America. She's standing outside, I believe, the hotel where Prime Minister Narendra Modi is going to stay during his 3-day visit. Malvika, we are seeing visuals of excitement as far as the Indian community is concerned in the US. Tell us firstly, you've been speaking to a lot of them. Tell us firstly, what are they expecting as Prime Minister Modi has already reached there?
Well, Modi has actually created a lot of excitement and euphoria amongst the diaspora in the US. So each time that he comes here, there are high expectations from his visits, and this visit is no different. As far as the Quad Summit is concerned, several key announcements are expected, and we are seeing a lot of enthusiasm amongst the members of the diaspora. A cultural show has been planned for Prime Minister Modi. He is going to be arriving at the DuPont Hotel here in Wilmington in another 10 minutes or so. After that, he will be attending the cultural show where members of the diaspora will be present. And then he is going to head to President Joe Biden's residence for the Quad Summit, where he is going to be meeting Joe Biden and the Australian and the Japanese prime ministers.
Right, Malvika. Now we also know that as far as US President Joe Biden is concerned, this is going to be his last, Quad summit as the President of the United States of America. It's an in-person Quad summit and it's going to happen in his hometown. So it becomes very, very important. Before we get to the takeaways there, can you tell our viewers a little bit about, the kind of reception that's planned for the top leaders of three big economies of the world and what can really be expected? I believe there's going to be an intimate dinner also as far as these four leaders are concerned.
Yes, an intimate dinner has been planned for in the evening, and even right now, a very warm welcome is being extended by President Joe Biden to Prime Minister Modi, to the Australian Prime Minister and to the Japanese Prime Minister. The reason being that this is the last Quad summit for Joe Biden, but there is an emphasis here that there is bipartisan support for the Quad nations, and Modi and the Prime Ministers of Australia and Japan are key players. So dinner has been lined up, bilateral meetings have been lined up, and all in all, a very warm welcome is being extended. We're hearing the siren of a healthcare vehicle. These are the patrolling services that are happening right before the Prime Minister arrives at the hotel here in Delaware.
Right. So, Malvika, I'm just requesting you to please stay on with us for a moment before we talk about the key takeaways that we can look forward to from the Quad Summit, the business part of it, and, strategically how important this Quad Summit is for the Indo-Pacific region. I want to quickly play out for our viewers some reactions that we have got from the members of the Indian diaspora who are waiting to welcome Prime Minister Narendra Modi in the US for this three-day visit.
Modi, 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 एक ही नारा एक ही नाम, जय श्री राम, जय श्री राम। हम पहले ही शुरुआत करते हैं। हम भारतवर्ष के राजस्थान जगह से रहने वाले हैं और राजस्थान नगरी ऐसी है, राजस्थान जगह ऐसी है जहां मोदी का परचम छाया हुआ है पूरा। हम यहां आए हैं, मोदी जी का बहुत बहुत स्वागत करते हैं। बहुत सारी आशाएं हैं मोदी जी का वैश्विक स्तर पे, भारत में सब जगह उनका इतना नाम छाया हुआ है कि इन्होंने भारतवासियों का गर्व ऊंचा कर दिया है, सिर ऊंचा कर दिया है। हम कहते हैं कि दशकों में ऐसा प्रधानमंत्री नहीं आया होगा और हम चाहते हैं कि ये प्रधानमंत्री जी अगले शतकों तक रहे, शतकों तक रहे, शतकों तक रहे।
मोदी, मोदी। कहाँ से आए हैं? हम लोग फिलाडेल्फिया से आए हैं एंड वी केम फॉर द वेलकम मोदी एंड वी आर वेरी एक्साइटेड टू लाइक सी हिम इन नियर, लाइक जस्ट नियर अराउंड अस।
I will say one thing, our Prime Minister Modi, he's a generational leader. You won't find that, and our Indian people need to understand that Modi is the best, and you won't find leader like this. If you want to take India as a superpower, we need to make sure Modi is there all the time.
We are from Delaware and we are proud of to be Delaware, and we are very lucky that our Prime Minister of India, he is from Gujarat, and Biden, he is in Delaware. So we are getting both the President and Prime Minister from our state. So we are very lucky and fortunate today. So thank you very much.
All right, so those are the live visuals that we are now showing to our viewers. Prime Minister Narendra Modi has arrived. He's come out of the plane and he's being welcomed by the members of the Indian community. And there you can see live shots coming in of Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Let me go back to Malvika, who continues to be live with us on the latest that we are bringing for our viewers from the United States of America, even as we continue to be on these visuals of Prime Minister Narendra Modi, who's being welcomed. Malvika, now, of course, as you were telling us, in just a few moments from now, he will be arriving where you are, and, and then the business is going to begin, because he does not like to waste any moment. And we all know it's a packed itinerary for him. So, the first engagement is the Quad Summit, I guess. Tell us more now.
That's right. So the first engagement, I must emphasize, it is a very, very packed schedule that the Prime Minister has. He is for just a day in Delaware, and then he's heading to New York for 2 days continuously. He has engagements with different parts and sections of the society. But coming back to the Quad Summit, which is going to take place today in just a few hours, there is a growing influence of China. And the aggressive tendencies of China's continues. But at the same time, China is a very important trade partner for India. So what India is doing right now is a zone balancing act, so to speak, whereby partnering with the US, Japan, and Australia in the Indo-Pacific region, they are indicating to China that a powerful group is here, and a lot of maritime cooperation is going to take place. For the first time, a US Coast Guard vessel is going to be placed in the Indo-Pacific, and joint exercises are going to be taking place between India, US, Japan, and Australia. So a key summit to look out for to deter China, but the cooperation is not going to just stop as far as security issues are concerned. A moonshot related to cervical cancer prevention, an event is expected today on the sidelines of the Quad Summit. We are also likely to see an announcement related to disaster risk management, to cooling projects in India. So a lot of action and deliverables are expected at the end of this summit, because remember, it is also the last summit for the Japanese Prime Minister, who's also decided not to contest in the upcoming Japanese election. So it's Joe Biden and the Japanese Prime Minister, both of whom are participating in their last Quad Summit. The US, to emphasize that there is going to be a bipartisan support, because the country goes for elections at the end of the year in November. There is a Quad caucus that has been established at Capitol Hill to emphasize on the bipartisan support in the US for the Quad Summit.
Right, and you've mentioned the China factor here, and we know how White House has already confirmed, Malvika, that China is high on the agenda as far as the Quad Summit is concerned. So I'm going to talk to you about that aspect as well in just a bit. But before that, I want to show our viewers the reaction that we have got from US President Joe Biden ahead of Prime Minister Modi's arrival in the US. He's put out a social media post as well. And for more on this, let me straight away go across to my colleague Rishabh, who is joining us live. Rishabh, over to you. Tell us, what is it that US President Joe Biden has said?
Well, definitely, Hina, all the leaders have started reaching Philadelphia. The Australian Prime Minister was already in Philadelphia for the past few hours. Prime Minister has just landed, and Prime Minister Kishida from Japan would be landing soon. And here is a tweet that has come in from the POTUS, the President of the United States, saying that today I'll welcome Prime Minister Albanese, Modi, and Kishida to my home. So very clearly, President Biden saying that the Quad Summit, which is scheduled in Wilmington, in Delaware, he'll be hosting these leaders at his residence in Delaware, and where he also goes on to say that these leaders aren't just essential for ensuring free and open Indo-Pacific, they are friends of mine and friends of our nation. So a very warm as well as personal welcome by the President of the United States for the three leaders for Quad Summit. He also goes on to say he look forward to the to all that we'll be accomplishing in the summit ahead. So the fourth in-person summit, sixth Quad Summit in total, is happening in Delaware today, and in few hours we'll have first the bilaterals between the leaders and the Quad Summit that will culminate into dinner for all the leaders at the residence of President Biden at his ancestral house in Delaware, in Wilmington in Delaware.
All right, Rishabh, thank you for the moment for joining us with all of those details. We'll, of course, we're coming back to you for more on this. And joining us on the broadcast this evening is Chirayu Thakur, who is foreign policy expert. We also have with us in fact, Captain Alok Bansal, Director, India Foundation. Thank you very much, both of you, for joining us here on Times Now. Malvika continues to be with us as well. But Chirayu Thakur, I want to begin this discussion with you. You just heard my colleague Rishabh telling us how US President Joe Biden has welcomed the leaders, specifically those who are coming for the Quad Summit, because it's an important one. And for Prime Minister Modi as well, this is an important engagement as far as his visit to the US is concerned. It's going to be an in-person summit this time, the last one for US President Joe Biden. What are your expectations, and how do you read the welcome message that has come from Joe Biden?
Good evening, and thank you for having me. I think this Quad Summit has been very significant, and it is happening after a slightly longer pause. In between, there was a G2 summit between China and the United States, and there were rumors that President Biden is prioritizing some sort of detente on the economic front as well as on the strategic front with China, and he's moving slow on the Quad Summit. So there were a lot of questions roaming around. And this Quad Summit, the kind of enthusiasm and the euphoria that Biden administration is currently showing towards it, it's very clear that Quad has not gone down on agenda. He may be distracted for a while with what is happening in the Middle East or the Russia-Ukraine war or some other domestic challenges. We also know that during this period, he was high on campaign and then had to drop out after the disastrous performance. So Washington specifically was distracted with so many other things, but Quad is back on the agenda. And him hosting this specifically in Wilmington, Delaware, shows that he wants to weld this particular Quad Summit into his legacy, that people should see him as someone who not only continued Trump era legacy of the Quad, but also took it to the next level. So despite it was India's turn hosting this Quad Summit, he said, no, this is my legacy and I am going to take it forward. And on the top of it, it's not only politically symbolic, but also the kind of Coast Guard exercise that we are now listening that they could be included, and more military angle, more military substance could be provided. It seems that Quad is really taking the momentum forward.
Right. Interesting. Captain Alok Bansal, firstly, I want to talk to you about, the personal touch that's being given by US President Joe Biden for the Quad Summit specifically, because it's going to be his last one as the US President, him hosting the leaders in his hometown, the intimate dinner. How does this compare to the previous Quad Summits that we've seen under Joe Biden?
See, firstly, I think this Quad Summit is very important because two of the leaders, that is President Biden and Prime Minister Kishida of Japan, they'll be stepping down. This will be their last summit. So for them, it is very, very important. And consequently, what President Biden has done is that he's taken it to Delaware, where he wants to do it, leave behind a legacy for people to remember that this is his last summit, which he participated. More importantly, I think he's focusing more on cancer moonshot. Right. That is to eliminate cancer. That is to bring about research into this dealing with cancer, where different all the Quad countries come together, pool in their resources, and create vaccines, so that especially HPV vaccine, etc., so that cervical cancer, and as President Biden says, that the cancer as we know it ceases to exist. Let's see how it works out. But that's a very, very desirable proposition. And you will see that these leaders who are coming, and for Prime Minister Modi also, this is the first visit to US in his third term. Right. So they will come. I think we will. It is after a long time that we are having a physical meeting of the Quad Summit, and I think that is where I think new policies, new agendas will be unveiled. New policies, new agendas will be unveiled. That's what you feel. Captain Alok Bansal, requesting you to please stay on with us, and I request my other guest as well to please stay on with us. We are getting live visuals, viewers, at this point in time of Prime Minister Narendra Modi, who is now interacting with the members of the Indian diaspora, the Indian community that has arrived, in Philadelphia to specifically welcome the Prime Minister. And there you can see in his own, typical style, he's out there among the people, waving at them, signing autographs, etc. Because remember, these people also, a large number of members from the Indian community have been waiting for hours now, perhaps to just catch a glimpse of Indian Prime Minister in the US. Many have arrived there, from youngsters to women, all have come there just to have a glimpse of the Prime Minister, of Indian Prime Minister in the United States of America. Many can be seen taking selfies with the Prime Minister, and there you can see PM Modi also, with those people, shaking hands and also, meeting them. And this interesting meet and greet is what we are seeing happening after he came out of the aircraft, after he was welcomed, in Philadelphia. Let me now go across to Malvika as well, who continues to be live with us, even as we are showing these very interesting, Malvika, colorful visuals coming in.
a lot must be really going into planning and coordinating this whole thing, because people come out, there are cultural events at multiple places, and then we see, the moment Prime Minister reached the US, all of them out there, all ready to meet him and say hello and take autographs. Interesting.
That's one thing that I have personally also found very interesting. This is the third time I'm tracking Prime Minister Modi's visit to the US, and each time there's a lot of enthusiasm. What is interesting to note is that the enthusiasm never seems to die down. He's very popular amongst the diaspora because the diaspora believes, and very strongly so, that he has been able to carve out a niche identity for them. When Modi comes to the US and he has one-on-one meetings with top leaders, whether they be in the political sphere like the President of the United States or those be the top corporate leaders, he sends out a message that India is an equal country and Indians are an equal, integral, important part of the US political and social fabric. And that identity that Modi has created for the diaspora has made him connect with the Indian diaspora and made him such a popular figure here in the US.
Right. Interesting point that you've made there, Malvika. And I'm going to come back to you in just a bit. Let me also get in a reaction from J.K. Tripathi, former ambassador, who's also now joining us in this interesting discussion. Ambassador Tripathi, thank you for speaking with us here on Times Now. It's interesting to see the enthusiasm that we are seeing, in the US among members of the Indian diaspora, and how things have changed quite a lot from the first visit of the Prime Minister Narendra Modi to the US and to this 8th one in 2024. What are your observations?
You see, before Prime Minister Narendra Modi, that is at the time of Manmohan Singh or even earlier Prime Ministers, the interaction between the Prime Minister, visiting Prime Minister and the Indian diaspora in those countries would be limited, because of the so-called security reasons, because of preoccupation, because of the oldness of the Prime Minister, whatever you say. But with Prime Minister Modi, these things are different. He freely mingles. Of course, security is there, but invisible, but he freely mingles with Indians and gives Indians a sense of pride that they are Indians living there in the country of their residence and helping those countries to grow economically, politically even, and that is what gives Modi a cult following. It is not only US. You see, any other country he goes, whatever, even if Indians are in minuscule numbers, they come to meet and greet Modi, and Modi also, Prime Minister also responds very well. So this is sort of one-to-one reaction, one-to-one interaction with the crowd, which makes Modi the most popular leader in the world. And this will also go a long way in Indian diaspora's mind to support India, support the present regime, and work for projecting a better image of India in those countries they live. Yes.
Right. Interesting. Ambassador Tripathi, a very important point you've made there, and I'd like to discuss it with Dr. Swasti Rao as well, who's Associate Fellow at Manohar Parrikar IDSA, also now joining us on the broadcast. And I'm going to discuss this and take the discussion forward and we are keeping you ahead as far as Prime Minister Narendra Modi's historic visit to the United States of America is concerned. These are the first visuals that we have got of Prime Minister Narendra Modi after he arrived in Philadelphia in US. And there you can see he was welcomed by enthusiastic members of the Indian community, the Indian diaspora there. And after arriving in Philadelphia, he can be seen meeting the people people who've been waiting for Prime Minister Narendra Modi in the US. This is the set of visual that we've got for you from Philadelphia Airport, where we can see members of the Indian community trying to take selfies with Prime Minister Modi and then shaking hands, signing autographs, etc. And there are kids, there are women, and people have come out there to welcome the Indian Prime Minister in the US. Now, viewers, we have also spoken to some members of the Indian diaspora outside the DuPont Hotel in Delaware. Listen in to what they had to say about Prime Minister's visit.
Hi, I am at the DuPont Hotel in Delaware, where Prime Minister Modi is expected shortly. Several cultural performances have been planned for him, and we have some of the performers with us. Since when have all of you been practicing for Modi's arrival?
Only 2 days.
We only practice for 2
Only 2 days.
And would you like to show us some of your moves?
Oh yeah, sure.
Yeah, let's do it.
1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2.
So where all have you guys come from?
Wilmington, Delaware.
All of you live in
Pennsylvania.
You're from Pennsylvania?
Delaware.
Delaware, yes. Pennsylvania now.
Welcome, Delaware.
You're also Delaware? And how many Indians live in Delaware?
So many. It's
a pretty large community here.
Yeah.
We are the next New Jersey, trust me.
Yeah,
It's a huge community. Huge community. And it's growing and growing and growing.
So what excites you about Modi? I mean, you guys have invested time to practice.
He's the Prime Minister. I know. Mr. West India is the best. Yeah, India is the best. He's the hero.
So that was the conversation Malvika earlier had with the members of the Indian diaspora dressed in Indian attire, waiting to welcome Prime Minister Modi in Philadelphia. And this is going to be our top focus now. Chirayu Thakkar, foreign policy expert, is live with us. Dr. Swasti Rao, associate fellow at Manohar Parrikar IDSA, is with us. J.K. Tripathi, former ambassador, is joining us live. We also have with us Captain Alok Bansal, director, India Foundation, and Malvika continues to be with us as well. Dr. Swasti, I want to, take your opening comments on the kind of welcome Prime Minister Modi has received this time as compared to, how the situation used to be way back in 2014. From his first visit to his 8th visit to the US this year in 2024. What are your observations?
Well, before I begin, I think what you see happening there is also a reflection of the fact how India-US ties have evolved in a manner which is very unprecedented for India as well. So when you say that between the first visit to the 8th visit, the kind of welcome that Prime Minister Modi has started to getting, the kind of legitimacy that Prime Minister Modi has started to get, the kind of support, the kind of leadership that he has taken world over, I think what you see now is simply, a very humble ode to the fact that this is going to be one of the most lasting legacies of the Modi era, which is that he really took India's not just public diplomacy wherever he went. I mean, Modi's public diplomacy is, I think, a case in point here, regardless of whether he's in the US or wherever he goes. But not just that in a general sense, but also what he has done for the India-US ties, which are at an unprecedented high. And this is a kind of a strategic relationship that even before Prime Minister Modi went, you had the Raksha Mantri go there, last month, where he said that this is going to be one of the most important partnerships in the world. So obviously what you see is just a fine display of what all I just said. Yes, back to you.
Those are important points you've made, Dr. Swasti Rao. Captain Alok Bansal, now clearly a lot is going to change in the US over the next few weeks. And there is going to be an election in the US, and this is going to be the last Quad summit as far as US President Joe Biden is concerned. So what all has happened till now is perhaps going to take a new turn. What is it that you are looking forward to from the Quad summit that's going to happen this time for India?
See, Firstly, we need to be very clear that in US there is a bipartisan consensus as far as relations with India is concerned. These are the common values of pluralism and democracy that bring India and US together. And I think during this Quad summit, we will see further strengthening of India-US relations. I think we will see greater US investment into India and collaboration in fields like green energy. Now, of course, moonshot vaccine is a very, very big thing. India and the other Quad countries will collaborate. And I think we should, going forward, see more and more US investment coming into India, because if India has to sustain this level of growth that we have been witnessing for last few years, we will need greater investment coming from abroad. And I think that will be the first requirements. Of course, this also strengthens the personal chemistry between the leaders, but two of them are actually going to go away after this particular summit. So we would see strengthening of relations between all these countries. Our ties between all these four countries have been strengthening. But in the past, we have seen that the Quad summits have talked too much of coming together and investment and economic issues. Many of them have not fructified. So I think we will probably need to move forward. And I think the focus is going to be issues like biotechnology, medicines, and of course, green energy, which will be there. Of course, despite not being an agenda, security issues will always remain in the background. And I think the leaders will discuss rule-based international order, which we have been talking of for too long, especially in the Indo-Pacific region.
Right. And this Quad summit becomes extremely important for a number of other reasons as well. And I'd like to discuss those two with my guests. Requesting all of you to please stay on with us. Jessica Stone, correspondent, Voice of America, is also now joining us on the broadcast. Thank you, Jessica, for joining us. All eyes are going to be on the Quad summit as the first big engagement for Prime Minister Narendra Modi that we are all watching out for very, very closely. How critical is the Quad summit for India at this juncture, and what are you picking up from there? What should we be watching out for this time?
Yes, hello from Delaware, just outside of President Biden's residence in Wilmington. We cannot really speak to why India needs the Quad, but we can say that Washington really does need the Quad, because Washington's goal here is to increase the visibility and the alliances throughout the Indo-Pacific, wanting to increase the visibility of democracies in particular, and of course, India, Australia, Japan, and the United States, all democracies that touch the Indo-Pacific. It's in the U.S. interest, U.S. officials argue, that rule of law, freedom of navigation, freedom of speech, religion, the vote, all of these things are celebrated in these major democracies around the Indo-Pacific. And the Biden administration says these are strengths that democracies can bring to the region to make it safer and to make it more prosperous.
Right. Jessica, stay with us. Chirayu Thakur, now, as far as Quad is concerned, we know how China specifically has reacted in the past about formation of Quad. China has always, considered it as like some sort of an anti-China clique. Now, we are seeing a time when there has been rise of China as an aggressor, many say. Some say that China has become more assertive. With this background, what can you expect from the leaders in the Quad summit? Because the White House clearly has indicated that China is going to be high on the agenda.
Yes, see, China is one factor which nobody formally speaks about. If you pick up any major document that Quad has 6 Quad summits has produced so far, but China revolves everywhere. And the challenge in front of these poor countries, if they want to contain Chinese threat in the Indo-Pacific region, it is not only the security threat, it is of course there, but apart from that, China has very strong economic ties. Some of the times it weaponizes these ties with Southeast Asian countries, and now we are seeing with South Asian countries as well. It also has this habit of, lending unbearable sums of money and then weaponizing that debt as well. So China is playing this game very well through all tools available at its disposal. And therefore, these 4 countries will have to think about themselves. And specifically, I would like to raise one more point. If you want India's continued cooperation in Quad, as our friend from the US was saying, I think there are other friction areas where US and India has some of the problems recently. They need to work on that as well, because if you want to work in this sort of a plurilateral, you can't continue without the trust, without lack of major friction areas. And there are certainly specific areas where India and the US will have to work together if they want this cooperation to grow manifold.
And what are those other key areas before I go across to Dr. Swasti Rao in China?
Yeah, so I see two major friction areas which, the White House needs to take seriously as far as Indian sensibilities are concerned. The first I see is the Khalistan issue. On the eve of Indian Prime Minister visiting, and you want them complete cooperation on Quad, you cannot invite Khalistanis who are effectively secessionists in the White House to assure them that you will get protection, you will do this, that, and still we will protect you. I do not see that sort of a support going very well with the Indian establishment. That is one area. Second, what I'm learning is that there will be a separate conversation between the Indian and American counterparts on the Indian Ocean. In the recent Bangladesh episode, Indian establishment feels that India's interests have been blatantly disregarded with whatever Washington has done. And I'm glad that a separate conversation is happening. So you cannot continue to expect cooperation from India and disregard India's sensibilities in its own neighborhood, and the secessionist movements that are flourishing in the US. So I think these are the two areas on which a very mature dialogue would be required for both countries.
But Dr. Swasti Rao, that's going to be more of a discussion when the bilateral perhaps happens between Prime Minister Modi and US President Joe Biden. What is your view on what Chirayu Thakur mentioned, and also on the China factor specifically? Because it's this time, it's the White House which has said that China is going to be high on the agenda. So it's something that has come from the White House. Do you see something specific coming about China after the Quad summit in the statement this time?
Well, as far as, a couple of things here, I think India's policy of remaining China agnostic will continue because, like I said, and, we all understand for very obvious reasons that India has had this country agnosticism when it comes to sort of taking names, because we do not want to play into the Chinese narrative of saying that Quad is some kind of a nation, NATO, or Quad is some kind of a, a grouping which is against China to sort of check China, etc. I don't think we want to give China that kind of importance because of what is, of course, happening at the LAC and our own engagement, the way it's evolved. So I think when it comes to naming China, I would rather wait for the wording to emerge to be able to have a more clear view on how far this goes. But my assessment is that we would remain China agnostic, which is that we would rather not get into this name calling because it is against our interests. That's the first thing. The second thing is about Bangladesh, and I would like to mention here is that unlike how the media played it out, and unlike how the strategic debate around it kind of emerged, but if you carefully see what the Indian intelligence agencies said about Bangladesh and the alleged regime change, I think the Indian intelligence agencies actually called out against China and Pakistan, and not really the US, which was also a very popular, so to say, case in point when we were discussing that. I think this discussion on Bangladesh is something which is very relevant. I agree with Chirayu, on that point, but I do not really see that this is a point of friction. I mean, I have not really found any evidence to suggest that what happened in Bangladesh is a kind of a friction if you go by whatever officially has been happening. I mean, I'm not really talking about the kind of strategic discussion cloud that you see around these issues, but if you look at the government issues. Now, with respect to China, yes, I think one needs to keep in mind that there are certain key areas of convergence when we talk about, a Quad, or when we talk about the Indo-Pacific. Being a maritime construct, being a maritime domain, I think something which will really impact the cause of, Quad. Why is it that these four countries have come together to ensure a rules-based order, to check anybody's unilateral, revision of the status quo, etc. If you really look at that, I think at the heart of these things really lie information sharing on maritime domain awareness, because we are talking about a maritime construct. So while on the one hand, the Quad can emerge as a very effective enabler for the COVID vaccine diplomacy, for all those kind of things, but at the heart, because we are speaking about a maritime construct. Here, I think one must see. I mean, what I'm personally interested in seeing is that whether this time do we see any more consolidation happening on the IPNDA initiative? Because, I think what one needs to understand is that just by having or signing this particular agreement on sharing MDA or maritime domain awareness is not enough. There are certain technical challenges, which is that, these countries, when you speak about India, US, Japan, and Australia, we use different information portals. So if you actually want to talk in the same maritime semantics, which again is the heart of that architecture, I would be interested in that. And just my last point is that the China factor is going to be important, and it is going to ultimately impact how the Quad evolves. Because like I said, that, right now we all know that Kishida perhaps is going to step down, and then, it's also Biden's last Quad summit. In that regard, while there is bipartisan consensus, of course, that we all know that, but you also have to keep in mind how the Inflation Reduction Act kind of plays out. What is the new president's policies when it comes to EVs, slapping.
Yes, those are important issues. But since you mentioned about maritime security, that's another aspect that we are looking forward to as far as PM's visit to the US this time is concerned. And I want to take that question across to Jessica Stone. Jessica, what are some of the ambitious announcements we can expect in terms of India's maritime security from this visit?
Yeah, still not a lot of details at this point, but we do know there'll be two major announcements. One regarding curbing illegal fishing. This is something Deputy Secretary of State Kurt Campbell, the former National Security Council person at the White House for Indo-Pacific policy, he talked about this on Capitol Hill this week, arguing that China is the main offender of illegal fishing throughout the Indo-Pacific, and there will be some sort of coordinated mechanism for maritime awareness, maritime domain awareness with these four partners that will allow them to be more effective at curbing illegal fishing. This could have technological implications, strategic implications, defense implications, because of course another big part of the cooperation between these four nations is humanitarian assistance and response. There's a number of natural disasters in this part of the world, and they want to work together to combat them for the good of all four nations and their peoples. The other major announcement is something that is very close to President Biden's heart as well. Of course, you may remember that his son, Beau Biden, died of brain cancer. He has been involved since he was a vice president in something called the Moonshot Cancer Announcement, and he is very committed to finding a cure for cancer. What they're looking at announcing in this respect is something that would uncover and treat more quickly cervical cancer. We know that women in India, it's the second largest cause of death for women in India, and that frequently across India in particular, cancers are diagnosed later, meaning the prognosis is poorer. And so this is going to be an announcement in that regard for them to work out something to improve coordination for medical research and treatment of cervical cancer in particular.
So clearly this Moonshot Cancer event becomes extremely important, and some ambitious announcements as far as maritime security is something that we can look forward to. And we are keeping you ahead as far as Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit to the US is concerned. He has already reached there, and the first big engagement is the Quad Summit. We have with us Jessica Stone, correspondent, Voice of America, joining us live. Jessica, now there's another important aspect that I'd like to discuss with you, and that is about how India's position really has been on the ongoing conflicts, ongoing geopolitical situation around the world, Israel-Gaza war, the Russia-Ukraine conflict. How do you think India's position on these issues is likely to have an impact on, what happens during the discussions in the Quad Summit?
Yeah, all four of these leaders within the Quad are going to be talking about global conflicts, and the two most glaring examples of global conflicts right now that the U.S. is involved in and particularly interested in having positive outcomes in are, of course, the war in Gaza, and we've just seen a lot of activity in Lebanon and an escalation of conflict in West Asia. We just had that report in the last 24 hours about additional bombing there and the killing of a Hezbollah operative. So that's going to be part of the discussion. And what is India's role? What role can India play constructively there? The U.S. will ask. Also, of course, what's going on in Ukraine, and there we know that India's relationship with Moscow, which of course is very different than Washington's relationship with Moscow.
Right. Jessica, stay with us. In fact, we are now getting more live visuals that we are showing to our viewers at this point in time. And we can see more members of the Indian diaspora out there greeting the Prime Minister. And there you can see earlier we saw the engagement with the members of the Indian diaspora at the Philadelphia airport, and now he has arrived at the hotel where he is going to stay, and there we can also see more members of the Indian community who have arrived there to welcome the Prime Minister. And even as we continue to be with these visuals that we are getting live for our viewers, Dr. Swasti Rao and Chirayu Thakur continue to be with us on the broadcast. A quick comment, Dr. Swasti Rao, on what we were discussing with Jessica also earlier, because the geopolitical tensions are going to be a part of the discussion too. How do you think India's position on both Russia-Ukraine issue and the Israel-Gaza war is likely to have an impact?
Well, I would rather expect that the two sides better have a discussion on this, because if the two sides are coming together to play a more stabilizing role in the security situation of the world, which is absolutely in a very upended state right now, one would expect that obviously the Ukraine war and the Gaza conflict both should figure in these bilateral discussions, and also with other Quad members as well. I think on Ukraine first, because of course it started chronologically, it started first, and then probably I come to Gaza, although I'm not really an expert on West Asia, but nonetheless. So about Ukraine, I think what we have seen in the last 2 or 3 years of the war is that there is a far greater degree of acceptance in the West about India's special relationship. And when I say special, one has to understand that it's not really etched in stone. When we say special, we basically mean that there are certain characteristics to India-Russia relationship. Of course, I'm of the view, because I study the theater, that India-Russia relationship is also evolving in the aftermath of what is happening in the Ukraine war. From buying defense, now we are buying more oil, and that has in its wake brought more challenges as well as opportunities. So I'm not of the view, to argue that, Russia-India relationship is something which is etched in stone. Of course, it is as much a part of the world we are living in. But with respect to speaking, about the West and the initial, so to say, condescending attitude that the Western countries had on India's engagement of Russia, I think there is a far better, mature understanding on the fact that actually, you have to really support India's multi-alignment, because end of the day, this is going to be stabilizing the world. Absolutely. Like no other thing can.
So India's message on those fronts becomes very, very important as well. I'm completely out of time, but thank you very much, Chirayu Thakur, Dr. Swasti Rao, J.K. Tripathi, Captain Alok Bansal and Jessica Stone for joining us here on the special broadcast. That's going to be a top focus ahead as well.